All right, good morning. Thanks everybody for joining our meat industry office hours. This morning, just get us started, is Jeff Swenson, our livestock and meat specialist at the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. So I'll let you take it away, Jeff.
All right, sounds great. Thank you, Dan. So welcome. As Dan mentioned, we'll be relatively informal this morning, but so if you have questions, please let us know. You can ask questions by unmuting or in the chat, whichever you feel most comfortable with. I did want to start by giving an update. Uh, the National Association of Departments of Agriculture, or NASDA, held their winter policy conference recently, and Wisconsin Department of Agriculture Secretary Romansky attended and co-authored an action item for NASDA to urge USDA and Congress to appropriately fund state meat inspection policies to ensure a healthy and robust meat supply. The USDA FSIS in recent years has decreased funding for state inspection programs, and that has potential to impact state services and the meat processing industry. And the advocacy for Wisconsin at the NASDA conference will hopefully bring about some positive change on that issue. With that, today joining me is Paul Humphrey, the division bureau director in meat and poultry business, Division of Food and Recreational Safety at DATCAP. And we'll also hear a little bit later on from Paul from Polly's Chop Shop. He recently was awarded a grant, one of the infrastructure grants in the first round, and built a new processing facility. We'll hear from him. And just out of curiosity, Paul, are you on the line? Yep, he is joining right now. So Paul Humphrey, did you want to go ahead with some updates, or do we want to talk about grants and come back to you?
Whichever you prefer, Jeff.
Okay.
I'm happy to give my remarks, and then that way you can talk about grants, and then Paul can describe his experience.
That sounds great. Thank you.
All right, very good. So bear with me here. I'll try to share my screen for you all. Let's see if this works for you. Does that look appropriate?
Yep, looks good, Paul.
All right, very good. All right, so as Jeff mentioned, my name is Paul Humphrey, the Bureau Director for the Bureau of Meat and Poultry Businesses, and it's very good to be with you this morning. Some news. We've been without an administrator for a little bit of time now, but happy to share with you all that the department has announced Adam Brock as our new division administrator. He comes to us from Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin, where he was Vice President of Food Safety, Quality, and Regulatory Compliance. So we're very happy to have him joining us starting on Monday. A little bit of updates specific to the Wisconsin meat program. We may have some federal establishments. So I'm trying to keep my remarks as generic as I can, but a couple of key positions have been hired or filled. So for us in Northwest Wisconsin, Jason Blashka has started as our Circuit 1 supervisor. So he'll be out visiting establishments, working with staff as time progresses. So if you see a new face, that's who it is and what he's there for. Dr. Clayton Apgar has joined us after that position being a year vacant in Northeast Wisconsin in the Green Bay area as a meat safety veterinarian. He comes to us from FSIS. He also has a degree in advanced degree in pathology. So we're very privileged to have him joining us as well. Two of our inspection staff experienced promotions here, and on Monday they start as food scientists within our program. They'll also be serving as EIOs. So Crystal Oxborough and Anna Martin are those two individuals. So we're happy for them, and you'll see them in new roles if you work with those staff. As far as our vacancies, we've had quite a few in recent times, but we're working very hard to fill those. We do have a current regulatory specialist vacancy in Southeast Wisconsin, so we're working to post and fill that position. And we have a handful of meat safety inspector positions that are in various stages of recruitment and hiring and job offers and things like that. So we're very eager to fill all of those. And so you'll be seeing new faces in establishments in most parts of the state. All right, just a couple of kind of helpful words of wisdom here this morning. I've got a couple of different topics to share, but this is one specific to meat establishment operators, managers, owners. Really, my advice here is to take advantage of your weekly or biweekly meetings with your inspections staff. Those are great opportunities to ask questions. Be sure to provide them updates on your production plans for the future, whether it's new products or volumes. That information we make use of, and it informs our sampling programs. If there's questions on bureau updates that you've heard about, that's a great time to talk about that. If there's been MOIs issued or open NRs, those are great times to discuss those and provide updates to your inspector. So make sure that you're prioritizing those interactions because they're very beneficial. So I mentioned open NRs, and so just wanted a quick note on what a non-compliance is and I guess how to respond, right? So simply put, the non-compliance record is a document that communicates when a regulatory requirement has not been met. And so establishments are expected to take appropriate measures to address that non-compliance in a timely fashion, right? We certainly understand that some things take some time to collect, whether it's data or whether it's a repair or parts to be ordered or a contractor to be hired. And so certainly just keep your inspector informed about your intentions, your plans, things like that, so they have that assurance that it is being addressed. And we very much appreciate that. If you, for some reason, disagree with the non-compliance that was issued, you do have appeal rights, right? So that's certainly an option. But the thing to not do in this situation is ignore it, right? So I touched on the appeal process, and this is true of both federal and state establishments. All establishments have rights to appeal a non-compliance. The contacts and the steps are maybe a little bit different between the two, but they're generally the same philosophy. So in both cases, establishments should be confident that if they do appeal a decision, they should have no fear of retaliation on behalf of the state or the federal program. It does follow the chain of command. Oftentimes you'll start with your inspector and make sure that you provide all information that you have to the inspector and they've considered what you've shared. And if you can't resolve the issue at that level, then certainly the next step would be either the frontline supervisor or our circuit supervisor in the case of a state establishment. And you'll see on the right-hand side the further chain of command that the appeals would go through. They would be submitted in writing and provide the rationale as to why it's felt that the non-compliance is not accurate or does not pertain to the regulation that was cited. Enforcement actions can also be appealed. So this is an important part of the process that there are multiple levels of appeal if there's for some reason a disagreement about a regulation or non-compliance. And I've linked at the bottom here when these, if this is made available to you all later, but there's a link or you can search for it yourself. On FSIS website, they have a whole procedure. It's very detailed. So if you're a federal establishment, please reference that material for yourself. All right, this is kind of a new change. I want to make sure that plants get early information on. So USDA APHIS has an ongoing comprehensive surveillance program to detect BSE, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, so mad cow disease. And so our inspection staff and our veterinarians are paying special attention to animals exhibiting CNS signs, central nervous system deficits, right? And those are listed for you there. So things like circling behaviors, blindness, head tilt, abnormal posture, difficulty rising, tremors, incoordination, and nystagmus, so abnormal eye movements and head pressing. So those are some of the indicators of a potential for a BSE case. And so because of the surveillance program and because of the regulation as stated, those animals are condemned, right? Condemned and then tested. So with that being said, the change here is that APHIS is going to continue covering the cost of executing this program. So we test for both BSE and in some cases rabies as well. But the change here is that the cost of the transportation and the disposal of the carcass would no longer be covered by the federal government. So what does that mean to meat establishments and producers? Don't send these animals to the establishment and don't receive them if you're a meat establishment operator or owner. Once they're delivered onto the premises, they've been considered, presented for inspection, and those animals would be, like I said, be condemned. So I want to make sure that the establishments have information as soon as possible. That was a recent change. We were informed from APHIS. We have just maybe a few a year within our program. Generally, most of our meat establishments receive very healthy, marketable cattle, and so we don't have very many of those situations, but they do come up, and of course, it's the loss of the animal, right? The loss of the product. So I want to make sure you have that information. All right, some resources, some training opportunities that are available. So real briefly here, the Humane Handling Institute in UW River Falls, kind of led by Dr. Kurt Vogel. They've got a number of really good training opportunities offered here yet this spring. Effective and humane restraint and stunning, as well as building a robust systematic approach to animal welfare. Both of those, I believe, are excellent courses. Would certainly recommend and suggest that meat establishments send staff whenever possible to those. The tuition is reimbursable through the Meat Talent Development Program, grant program. So don't let the cost be the deterrent, because it's reimbursable. The plug I'll make for both, we do see incidents across the state, and generally training would be a commonality in a lot of cases, and also restraint. So those are two really timely and topical subjects there. As far as the robust systematic approach, establishments that have developed those and have implemented those are in a really sound position when it comes to animal welfare. If there were to be an incident at your establishment, both the state and the federal program would look at those things a little bit differently, and you would, in some cases, be given or provided different options as far as next steps if there was to be an incident. So there is a benefit to the establishment if you are able to develop a program for your business. All right, UW Basic HACCP training. Jeff Sanilla at UW-Madison is again offering this opportunity to meat establishments. Again, tuition is reimbursable for those that are attending. So again, don't let the cost there be the deterrent. Again, with a lot of new employees coming into meat establishments, businesses turning over, it's a great time to get involved in this course. The course is it's a good building block for knowledge of HACCP when it comes to understanding what inspection staff are asking of you, or if you're maybe the HACCP coordinator at an establishment. It helps again grow your knowledge base so you can develop a really robust food safety system. If there's a need for outreach, our EIAOs, both at the federal and state level, are available to speak with meat establishments on any questions they have on requirements. Same goes for the veterinarians, right? They're able to provide outreach on humane handling and other topics as well. Just a note here at the end that outreach is information and question answering. It's really not a consulting, a training, or a writing of plans type of a interaction, right? So there's a resource for you, but if you have additional needs beyond that, of course, a consultant or other avenues are available. All right. So that concludes my remarks. I don't know if Jeff, if you want me to entertain questions at this point or at the end of the office hour discussion.
We can take a couple quick questions if you have them, and if you're more comfortable waiting to the end, that would be great too. I want to be respectful of our next speaker's time as well.
Very good.
Dan, are you seeing anything in the chat for questions?
Nope, I haven't seen anything come through yet.
Great. Well, I think we'll move on to talk a little bit about grants. And again, I want to be cognizant of our next speaker's time, another Paul. Paul Wary, correct? Am I saying your name correctly, Paul?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I want to first start by saying that there's another round of meat infrastructure grants open currently. Those applications are due no later than 5 p.m. on March 8th. And the legislature and Governor Evers working together, so bipartisan support, approved $200,000 each year of each biennium for meat processor grants with a maximum ask of $200,000. For this fiscal year, so this round, of infrastructure grants that total is 1.8 million. It does go back to 200,000 next year. So there's $1.8 million available, maximum ask of $50,000. You do need to be a meat processor. One of the reasons that we have Paul with us today is because he was in the second category. You have to be a meat processor, or you need to have a license by the end of the grant period in order to receive those funds and close out. So I think we'll stop there. We can talk about what the grants cover and don't cover after Paul speaks, but Paul is the owner of Polly's Chop Shop, and Polly's is in Luxembourg, Wisconsin. And I'll let you, Paul, give a further introduction if you wish, and talk a little bit about your process and how you incorporated grant dollars into building your facility.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. So when we started, the grants were just first coming out. Like you said, I'm Paul from Polly's Chop Shop in Luxembourg. And at that time, I can't remember, when did that grant come out? Was it in 2020 or 2021?
It would have been 2021 was the first round, yes.
Okay, yeah. So we were just in the process of starting to build at that time. They finally finished our facility in December of 2022 is when we realistically opened. So we applied for the grant, not knowing, if we would get it or not, with not being up and running yet, which is kind of nice, especially for new establishments out there, to know that the grant is still available if you're not actually up and running yet, and you will be in the future. The reason we applied for the grant was to help us with part of our build. We actually built from scratch, brand new building. We didn't buy any place and renovate or nothing. It was from the bottom up. So we actually build what they call an EPS panel building. It's all structured walls and everything like that. So it's supposed to be very efficient, and you can pretty much take any room in your building and turn it into a cooler, freezer, etc. in the future if you need it for expansion. So easy for expansion. I think that was kind of our biggest reason on the aspect of building like that. What we actually mostly used the grant money for was to help us buy some equipment to help further process. We do about 10 to 15 beef on average a week, or during our more busy time. Right now we're a little slower at the beginning of the year, and we do about 15 to 20 hogs as well. So we have a hog farm that we raise about 500 hogs on, and that's kind of one of the reasons we got into it. And I also worked at Otto's Meats and Marchant's Foods to learn the trade and stuff, and that's also how I got into it. So we do about 20 pigs for ourselves a month for our storefront, and then we do about 10, 15 other ones for other people on average every week. Some of the grant money was to help us finish our harvest floor, get our knock box up and going. It's a little bit more high tech than some of the other ones. We have a full head restraint and locks them in place, so that's very nice. I've noticed our animals come in there very calmly, and we don't have too many problems with getting them knocked or anything like that. It very is. I would tell anybody out there that is starting in the slaughter business, you would really encourage putting in a head restraint. It definitely helps keep the animal restrained, calm. It definitely cuts down on your delays and problems of not getting animals knocked. That is definitely a big help for us in that part of it. And then we also do further processing. So we make snack sticks, summer sausage, all the different types of further processes. I think kind of our future expansion plan is definitely to keep doing the animals, but start to get into more of the further process stuff. Starting to get into a couple more like gas stations, grocery stores with our product, and expand that part of it out. And kind of hoping to apply in with this new grant coming out too, to help us get some more equipment that would help just make us more efficient in timing and need less employees and stuff. Because we're at about 7 or 8 full-time employees right now, and we're pretty set with that. And I'm hoping with getting a couple more pieces of equipment, we can, be able to become more efficient and add another part of the production on and keep that growing as well. Like I said, though, the grant money is definitely a great thing and a huge help to any meat plant. I mean, from just with the cost of what equipment is, it's very helpful. I mean, from back in the 2000s to now, just the technology has come a long ways in what is out there for different pieces of equipment you can buy and help you do stuff. I mean, like our stuffing machine that we bought, that was part of what we use our grant money on too. It does 1 pound chubs. You just tap the machine one time, it sends them out. And they have the smaller machines that don't necessarily do that. So if you're sitting there, you're trying to weigh them out and stuff, it's just a time consuming thing. Is definitely huge on our aspect of it. I mean, any small business with the labor is definitely the big thing out there and everything like that. But
thank you, Paul. Does anybody have any questions for Paul? And this was from greenfield to building your whole business, correct?
right. Yeah, that's how we started. It was actually my parents used to have the farm right here, and then we moved that about 12 years ago. And then we took the field that we had here and turned it into the processing facility. We have it's a 150 by 50 is the size of the building we built. We kind of have everything. It's more sectioned off. So we have like our slaughter floor is separate, and our cutting room and our sausage room and our wrap room is all separate area room. So it's not one big open area. We tried to keep everything separate, especially for later on. We actually even have our one cooler for is right on the backside of our smokehouse. So we bring all of our smoke product in there, so we don't have to follow back into buy our animals and stuff, just trying to keep everything separate. So we don't got to worry about hopefully having any problems with bacteria growth and everything like that.
Thank you. Any other questions for Paul before we talk a little bit more about the grants? I see we do have some questions in the chat that I'll address right away. And Paul, you can be found on Facebook, and you do have a website for the business, correct?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. And I'm sure that Paul would be willing to talk with anybody that's thinking about applying for one of the grants, building a new facility, or adding on, and talk a little bit more about his experience one-on-one.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody has any questions, don't be afraid to reach out. I mean, we didn't hire anybody to write the grant. Me and my mom worked together and wrote it. So, I mean, it did take some time and a little extra work, but I mean, once you start writing it, it does become a little bit easier and stuff. So you can save yourself some money that way. And you don't have to hire somebody to do it for you.
Correct. The questions that we have in the chat was what is the maximum for this year's grant? And again, that's $50,000. And I'll clarify on that because there was 2 different grant programs. This is the state dollars, the meat infrastructure grant. It was put in place by the legislature and Governor Evers, and it was written into statute that the maximum award would be $50,000. 2 years ago, there was also the meat infrastructure grant. That was a one-time grant program using federal funds, the American Rescue Plan Act money. That maximum funding amount per establishment was a little bit high, well, a lot higher. It was $150,000, but that was federal money one time. This is an ongoing state-funded program. And I can walk you through. The other question was where to find the application. I'll verbally give you, there we go. Dan, thank you very much for putting that on. But if you go to the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture website, you can click on the Ag Development tab at the top of the homepage, then click on Meat and Livestock Development, and you will find an application to that program. And Paul brought up a couple of excellent points, and that he used some of those funds for equipment. And so this grant program is more flexible than other grant programs in other areas. So typically grant programs don't allow the purchase of equipment. This one does. So we do allow equipment purchase. Some consulting fees could be added in there. There is a $1 match. So if you do apply for $50,000, you are expected to invest $50,000 of your own money. But equipment upgrades, facility upgrades, updating harvest floors, we do prioritize projects that or our reviewers, I should say, not DATCAP employees necessarily, would review these grants. They do prioritize harvest establishments that would grow their capacity by at least 20% or grow throughput if you're not a harvester. If you don't harvest livestock, we'd ask that you also increase the amount of product that you are able to process using this. So it does not include real estate process purchases. You can't repay existing loans or mortgages. No rent is allowed. Advertising expenses, legal fees, and lobbying are not included. But other than that, it's relatively flexible, and I'll put my contact information if you have questions in the contact as well. Let me just have a second here to read the pot pie question. If you're required to have a meat processing license, you do qualify. That you need to have a meat processing license either through DATCAP and be state inspected, or FSIS and be federally inspected. If it is a product that you're putting meat into, such as pizzas and things like that, if you are a licensed meat establishment, you do qualify for this grant program and are welcome to apply. So the question specifically about pot pies, yes, you can absolutely qualify. How is throughput capacity calculated for a new establishment? Another great question. So the legislature felt strongly that this should not just be a grant for existing meat processors, that we should be encouraging new processing facilities to be built. And so be as detailed as you can. If you have any information about how many head of livestock you plan to process, amount of meat in pounds, tons, any retail establishments that you're already working with or plan to work with and supply product to, include that in your project proposal. The application is really only 2 or 3 questions, so it's fairly easy, but as much information and detail as you can add into that application, the better. So new establishment, do the best you can. We understand that there is no baseline. Just put as many projections as you can into that proposal.
This is Bloomington Meats. I have a question.
Yes.
Will it cover the workman's comp has been doing an audit of our plan, and our kill floor is on a lower level, and there's this open stairway, and she wants us to add a railing and a hoist, which is rather expensive. Would it cover something like that? Because it's not going to actually have us kill. It's going to be safety for the employees, but not, I mean, it might improve efficiencies, but we're just trying to figure out if it would cover something like that. She thinks it would.
There would be no issue with the grant funds covering that improvement in your facility. It very much would qualify from a competitive standpoint. If you can tie that to any efficiency, employee retention, or anything like that in your facility, that would be great. And I'd be happy to reach out to you and we can discuss it further. But the funds could be used for that. Especially if you can tie it to efficiency within within your establishment.
Okay, thank you.
Michelle, I'm reading your question right now, and I may need some clarification on it. So, is there any issue overlapping on construction or machinery? Meaning, if your costs are $1 million, can you apply for 50,000? So you can apply for 2 different grants. This $50,000 maximum grant through the infrastructure grant, and any other grants. You just can't double pay for the same thing. So one project, a federal grant could pay for part of it. You just need to be specific on what the state funds are paying for, and so that you're not using both state and federal funds to buy the same piece of equipment, if that makes sense. Patrick, your question is one that I'd be happy to discuss with you. So there is a grant period once you sign your the contract with the state to move ahead with this project and accept the project. There is a timeline, so you can't pay for equipment that was purchased before the grant period started. And match gets a little bit tricky with that too. So have to be careful to make sure that your match is within that grant period as well. So state infrastructure grant cannot be used for real estate purchases, but can be used to extend, enhance current facilities. That is exactly correct. So in I'll pick on Paul again. I'm sorry for doing this to you, Paul, but in his situation, he couldn't have bought the land from his parents to build that facility on. But any cost within that facility, for the most part, would be covered by the grants. If I missed a question, just put it back in the chat. I'll go through again while we discuss here, make sure that I didn't. Somebody asked for Polly's Chop Shop website. Paul Humphrey shared that. Dan shared the link to the grant program, the grant application. We want to make the grant fairly easy to apply for. So there's not a lot of questions, but to be successful and be funded, we do ask for as much detail, the detail as we can. So what's the reimbursement timeline? That's a good question. So typically it varies a little bit, but this is a reimbursable grant. So you spend the money and then you're reimbursed for that. It can take 4 to 6 weeks to be reimbursed through the system. The reason for that is that we fully expect to be audited by the fiscal bureau within state government. So we need to make sure that everything lines up, because we want any questions from the fiscal bureau to come back to DATCAP, not to the establishment. So I know that it's a little bit of a lag time to be reimbursed, but we want to field those questions rather than having them calling an establishment.
Thank you. I was also curious, is the submission like every 6 months when you do the update, or how frequent can you get?
Well, we do require quarterly reports because you do have 2 years to spend this money. Quarterly reports, we will follow up if someone is not submitting quarterly reports, or if we have questions, although that's fairly uncommon. And sometimes those quarterly reports are no update since the last report, but we do require quarterly reports. Ole's Up North sausage, yes. The answer to your question is yes. Paul, did you find at Polly's Chop Shop the quarterly reports that you did? We don't require them to be fairly detailed. Did you find that cumbersome or challenging, or were they fairly easy to submit?
No, that part's not too bad. It's pretty simple. I mean, you just kind of fill out if you did spend some of the money and what part of your money you were using it on, and if you didn't, you just fill out that part and send it in. I mean, if they do have some questions, they'll reach out to you, but it's pretty straightforward. I don't think we had ever too many questions on it, anything like that.
Thank you. We are at a point, I don't see more questions in the chat. We are happy to stay on. We're scheduled until 9 o'clock. So if there's more questions for either one of the Pauls or myself, just let us know. We're happy to stay on as long as need be. Otherwise, we can give you part of your day back, but we want to make sure that you have questions. I will quickly type in my email address and telephone number.
Jeff, I have a question. Jacobson's Market, Chippewa Falls.
Yes.
I apologize. It may be on the application, but I don't see the timeline of. I know that the deadline to apply is March 8th. What is the timeline after that for review, for notification of receiving the grant or being denied the grant, and then when the project can start?
That is a great question, and I am going to refer to that RFP because there is the RFP should list that timeline. So the applications are due to DACAP on March 8th. We've established that. Applications will be scored and selected by the review committee by the end of March 29th. Selected applicants will be notified no later than April 19th. And then we enter the contracting period. So anticipated project starts would be June 1st of 2024. And projects would need to conclude them by May 31st, 2006. Did that
Okay,
answer your
perfect.
question?
Yep, that's absolutely perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will have future office hours. We'll talk more about the Humane Handling Institute at one of them and some other things. So look forward to the announcements of quarterly office hours. I'm reading a question here. Someone has a poultry supply chain resiliency grant. Examples that fall under equipment, supplies, and materials. Paul from Polly's gave a good example of a sausage stuffer. Meat processing equipment certainly falls under that. Supplies could be as simple as hair nets, beard nets, PPE for employees, and materials would be the same. We materials, sausage casings can be approved. We don't recommend that. We recommend something that would be a little more, that would stick around a little bit longer in your plant than that. But equipment and supplies, fairly flexible. Other materials, if you have questions, reach out to me. It's probably covered as long as it's not on the bullet point list of things that are ineligible. And sometimes what we found, I'll bore you with a little bit of background. What we found in trying to grow capacity at meat establishments was that bottleneck may be your cooling system. You know, if you had a better cooling system, you could harvest more animals, process more further processed products. It might be your clipper. It might be a roll stock machine that would decrease labor because it's faster to package than using white paper or shrink wrapping. So that equipment, anything that would increase efficiency within the facility really is covered. I am not seeing any more questions in the chat. We can wait a few more minutes here, but yeah, like I said, we will have more office hours scheduled with Paul Humphrey and his staff. We'll have Kurt Vogel talk about the Humane Handling Institute, which is a good opportunity. Some other resources. Just so you know that the tuition isn't necessarily reimbursed at all of them, but if you do go to the UW-Madison Meat Science website and look under extension, a list of all the short courses that they have planned for the upcoming year are listed. I know they've got a sausage and snack course that's either going on now or coming right up. There is a harvest and fabrication school. If you need to send some employees to learn harvest and fabrication, that's a 2.5-day program. Not tuition reimbursable at that time, but that may change. So keep that in mind. And that's coming up next month in March. So that's a great resource. And Paul Humphrey talked about the Humane Handling Institute and HACCP. Those two programs are reimbursable, or at least 2 modules of Humane Handling Institute are reimbursed, as well as HACCP training. And we do pay for HACCP training. We'll reimburse tuition for 2 employees of a plant. If there's room in the class, we will allow a third and be reimbursed for that.
Jeff and Paul Humphrey, where can folks find you? Can you put your emails in the chat?
I put my email and cell phone in the chat. Oh,
Oh,
no,
perfect.
that was a direct message. I'm sorry. Only one of you got that. Can you think of anything that we should cover? Dan?
I think that just about sums it up, unless there are any more questions that folks have. And like Jeff said, if you think of anything after the fact, Paul and him are both reachable via email or phone, and are happy to answer anything that come up.
Yeah, with the grant period open, we expect some phone calls. And Paul's staff is always happy to answer phone calls, even the tough questions. I know that they're not always fun to ask, but Paul's staff is ready for that as well. If you're online and our USDA FSIS inspected, we can get you to the right spot to ask your questions of FSIS, and we can kind of go from there.
All right.
So
Well, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say this is recorded, and our contact information is there. Feel free to reach out to Paul Humphrey or myself. Paul Weary at Polly's, that we thank you very, very much for being here. It was very insightful. And I'm sure, like I said, he's happy to answer questions, especially of somebody that's looking to get into the business, as he's been through the challenges and opportunities already.
Yeah, and we'll be posting the meeting recording as well as the presentation slides of Paul's online, and then we'll be sending out a bulletin as well that will contain the link to the meeting recording and the slides as well.
Sounds great. Thank you, everyone.
Yep. If I don't see any other questions, so I can end the recording, and yeah, we will see you again at an upcoming office hour.
Thank you for the information, everyone.
You're welcome.